Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Sports and Other Things. I'm your host, Gabe. And today, I'm going to have to do a solo pod. Troy and I weren't able to meet up anytime this week. Our schedule's been a little hectic because of work and other things. So I wanted to go ahead and get some content out there before all the games this upcoming season and before the NFL season kicks off even more. So the things that I want to go over, I want to talk about the OU game versus Houston this previous weekend. Just kind of go over my thoughts and opinions and break down some of the stats and key things from the game. And then I wanted to just talk about some other big important games around college football that happened. Lastly, I'll just finish it off with the Packers and Bears games that we had last night. NFL season officially started last night. Everyone's looking forward to it coming up on Sunday. I'm so excited. You know, it's the it's the first official weekend that we will have football for the rest of the season. So I know we had some games on Saturday and Sunday, but that was kind of weird for college. So I just wanted to kind of jump into that before anything else gets underway. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, the OU Houston game this previous Sunday. For starters, that was an awesome time to have the game. The game is on a Sunday night when normally is reserved for an NFL game. It's the last Sunday before the NFL season starts, so everybody was prepped and everyone's excited. So they tuned in for that game on Sunday night. Super awesome. OU was the spotlight all night. They were the only game going on. So, couple key things. It was kind of weird, you know, not knowing what to expect going into the game, not knowing how much Jalen Hurts and the entire offense had learned the system, and then not really knowing what to expect of the defense. The defense was probably the biggest question going into the offseason, and you know, we were not 100% sure. Overall, the game was great. OU played great. They had a really good game on offense. They didn't score quite as much as I expected them to, but it was still a really good game from an offensive standpoint. And although their defense wasn't world stopping, their defense looked much improved. It kind of started to slip as the game went on. But at least those first few drives, their defense looked engaged. They looked aggressive. They were putting pressure on the quarterback, pressure on the running back. I mean, overall, very, very impressed with how the defense performed. So we'll kind of go into some stats. Jalen Hurts, the guy had a phenomenal game. I just cannot, fathom him coming in for his first game at OU. I know that he was a really good quarterback at Alabama, but I did not know what to expect at all. But I was definitely impressed, that's for sure. So for starters, Jalen had 332 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. Great game from a passing standpoint. He went 20 of 23, and I think 2 of those 3 passes that were not caught hit his receivers right in the hands. I know one was kind of a deep shot in the end zone, his receiver in the hands, and he dropped it. Not a big deal. 20-23, still fantastic. And then he also had another 176 yards on the ground. I mean, that's awesome as a quarterback. I mean, we did have Kyler all last season, so we kind of expected to have some rushing yards. But it's kind of funny watching Jalen because he's a pretty good amount taller than Kyler Murray is. And so watching him, it didn't look like he was moving as fast, but he was still moving really fast. His strides are just longer. He's not moving his feet as quick as Kyler does, but, I mean, he was outrunning guys for sure. He had another 3 touchdowns on the ground, so in total, in his Oklahoma debut, he had 6 total touchdowns. I mean, that's just fantastic. You couldn't ask for much better. I mean, I know towards the latter half of the fourth quarter, he wasn't playing at all for good reason. There's no point putting him out there. The game is pretty much decided at that point. I think it was a super, super phenomenal first game at OU. But my favorite part about Jalen's night was not any single play or any single thing that he did on the field. My favorite thing he did all night was the speech after the game, or the interview after the game, rather. he was interviewed on camera about his performance and the the sideline reporter was talking to him and just listing off all the great accomplishments he did and just the fact that he set a record for an Oklahoma debut and he did all this other great stuff and he didn't look happy. And you're kind of thinking, like, man, what's up with Jalen? And then he says, we got to do better. I got to talk to my boys. And to me, that's just phenomenal. Like, I cannot be more impressed with this guy. The guy has a great game from a statistical standpoint, and he is not happy with the overall performance. That's a competitor. Jalen is a great competitor, and he transferred to the University of Oklahoma to win a national championship. He didn't come here just to beat Houston by a couple scores. He came here to win. And he knows that even though his performance was great against Houston, even though OU's performance was very good against Houston, he knows that it was not enough to win a national championship. He wants to win. He looked at her and he said, we got to do better. I got to talk to my boys. She asked him just for even a little bit of smile. He said, no, I'm serious. And it's just amazing. Going from having quarterback like Baker and the personality of Baker and loving Baker at his time at OU, and then following that up by Kyler and loving Kyler and how he played and how he performed as a competitor, it was hard to compete with that. And then Jalen comes in here and acts like the perfect competitor and the true competitor. And I can have nothing but respect for the guy, nothing but happiness for this upcoming season. And I'm really looking forward to, the adjustments that he can make and the offense can make overall. So, like I said, that was my favorite part of his night. And the guy's a proven winner, and I fully expect him to keep his word, saying he's going to talk to his boys, saying that they're going to be better. I know that South Dakota next week. Or actually, the game will be tomorrow. I know that there's not much to expect from that game. OU's expected to blow them out pretty good, but the few momentary lapses that they had against Houston, I don't expect them to happen against South Dakota. I think Jalen's going to get everything locked down. He's going to shut that down, and he's gonna go out there and perform. He's probably not going to play the whole game. That would be pretty weird if he did. That means OU played really bad against South Dakota if he has to play the whole game. But we'll go ahead and move on. I thought Trey Sermon also had a really, really good game. Guy ran for 91 yards. Just Trey Sermon, he just puts in the work. You give him the ball, he can get you a lot of yards. The running OU's always had good running back core. All the running backs had pretty solid games for what they accomplished. But Trey Sermon definitely stood out with those 91 rushing yards. Going to receiving, you had Charleston Rambo. He had 105 yards and a touchdown. The guy looked great out there. I expect him to have a really, really great season. I'm a little surprised CeeDee Lamb only ended up with 46 yards, but he did have a touchdown. And I know that the best receivers can't always have the best game. Sometimes, you need a guy like Charleston Rambo, who's a very good player, but I would guess he's probably the second best receiver on the team behind CeeDee Lamb. So, you can't always expect the best guy to have the best game. It just doesn't happen every time. But, CeeDee Lamb still put in some work. He's still, 46 yards and a touchdown is still really good, considering how many different wide receivers end up on the field throughout a game. So, and like I said earlier, I thought OU's defense was very much improved. They just looked aggressive. They looked ready to compete, and they didn't look, lazy out there. It didn't look like they weren't going to try. Two guys I want to point out that I noticed that were very poised during the game. Kenneth Murray. Kenneth Murray's awesome. He was putting pressure on the quarterback. And he was all over the place. The guy was a beast. He was tearing it up pretty good. I'm really glad that he's helping lead this defense to look better than they can. If their defense can stay pretty good and stay fair, especially for the first half of the game. If they don't perform as well as the game goes on, that's not terrible. But if the offense gets into a good enough rhythm, gets a good enough lead, your defense doesn't have to perform at that same level as they do at the beginning of the game. So they came out looking great. Towards the end of the game, they didn't look as good, but still much improved. I expected Houston to put up a lot of yards and points, but they got shut out in the first quarter. And I wasn't expecting that from the defense. So Kenneth Murray looked really good. Ronnie Perkins also looked super good. I'm super glad that these guys are had a good game. I expect them to have very good seasons, and I can't wait to see what this defense looks like overall. There's not much to expect with the South Dakota game because, South Dakota, they are a good team in the FCS, but there's no telling. I expect the defense to play, very, very good against South Dakota. The only issue I had with the defense is that some of that aggression and some of the ways that they were playing might have been a little much. In certain aspect, they did give up a lot of penalties on the defensive end. Those penalties led to Houston getting a pretty good amount of yards, and it even led to them scoring a touchdown a couple plays later. So Houston could have been held under 30 points if some of the bonehead penalties hadn't happened. I know that sometimes your team needs to be energized. You need to have that aggression. So sometimes getting a little excited and getting pumped, happens, and that's fine. They just need to tighten it up a little bit and not continue that for the coming weeks, because once you start hitting Big 12 play, you can't give up a bunch of yards and penalties to the Big 12 teams. Their offense will kill you. Luckily, Houston wasn't able to capitalize on them as much as some other teams would. So, going on to kicking, that's looking a little rough. We're used to having two great kickers. We had Michael Honeycutt, and then we had Austin Seibert immediately after. Now, Austin Seibert is the all-time point leader by a kicker. So he leads all kickers in college football history in points because he played so much time at OU, and OU scored so many touchdowns and got down the field so much, he was able to get a ton of extra points and field goals. Didn't know what to expect with Callum Sutherland. For a minute I kind of forgot that Austin Seibert wasn't on the team. Saw that first kickoff, and man, that's how I knew. Austin Seibert kicks it out of the end zone every time. Callum was not doing it. He wasn't doing that same kind of thing. He missed a 49-yard field goal, which, 49 yards is a pretty long field goal, but typically an OU kicker will typically make those. I don't believe it was super windy, but he missed it. He missed it wide right. And then he missed a 36-yarder. That's a pretty good chip shot. Most college kickers should be able to make that with ease. I'm not saying it's an easy kick, but typically, that's pretty close to an extra point kick. I know it's about 10 more yards, but he missed that one wide right as well. I hope that maybe it's just pressure. Maybe it's just because it was his first game. He wasn't used to the atmosphere. Hopefully he'll step it up a little bit and play a little bit better. That's what I'm hoping for South Dakota. And luckily there's a little bit room for error against South Dakota. So, he can come out and, have, he can have his struggles, but hopefully, by the time UCLA comes around, his stuff is, his game is back together, and he can go out there and kick how a normal OU kicker would be. Because otherwise, without kicking, it's going to be an issue. I know that even one of his extra points was, he hit it, but it was wide right. And so it's going to be kind of difficult for OU to score a lot of points if we're not getting extra points and field goals throughout the season. So hopefully there's some adjustment that can be made there. That's pretty much all I have for OU game. That's pretty much what I noticed overall. I think the season's going to be a great season, like I said. The South Dakota game tomorrow, it's not going to be anything major. So I expect them just to blow them out. It's going to be a good game, but I bet you there's going to be a lot of people not watching it by the time the fourth quarter comes around. And then I want to move over to some other big games. The first game that we had to kick off the season was Florida against Miami. Well, Florida won 24-20. That's a pretty big rivalry game between Florida and Miami. That's one of the bigger rivalries in college football. Even though Miami wasn't ranked, I knew that it was going to be a good game. Florida ended up squeaking it out at the end, a very close game. So, Miami's a good team. I wouldn't be surprised if they're ranked here in a couple weeks because their only loss would be to a highly ranked Florida team. So, and then moving on to another interesting game, maybe not a big game, but it could have some ramifications for the Big 12. Iowa State. They played Northern Iowa, who Northern Iowa's not a horrible team. They're not a really, really bad team, but they're not a good team, I would say, in my opinion. Well, to beat Northern Iowa, they had to go into triple overtime, and they beat them 29-26. First of all, 29 points for a Big 12 team is not very common. Iowa State is normally good at putting up more points than that. And then not only are they good at putting up more points than that, but they only put up 29 to Northern Iowa. And then they scored that 29 points against Northern Iowa after 3 overtime periods. So you had the first, second, third, and fourth quarters plus 3 more overtimes. And they still only scored 29 points. That's pretty interesting. I don't think Northern Iowa's defense is that great. So I'm a little confused on what happened. It's first game of the season, maybe getting some jitters out. They could come out and smack whoever their next game is. I wouldn't be surprised if they do that. It happens. I know that sometimes people don't always perform. I know OU's had games against teams maybe a little bit better than Northern Iowa, and they haven't just put it to them like they should. So it happens, but it's definitely something to keep an eye out on because it could affect the Big 12 this season if Iowa State continues to play the way they played against Northern Iowa. And then the last game, we had a pretty great game against Auburn and Oregon. Auburn ended up squeaking out that game. They scored a touchdown with like 6 seconds to go, I believe. They beat them 27-21. Oregon had a chance to win because Auburn didn't kick a normal kickoff, so it gave Oregon a good field position. Well, the problem is I haven't seen the actual play. I've been trying to find the video everywhere, but from what I understand, the Oregon quarterback has a chance to at least tie the game with a touchdown and then win it with an extra point. He has a chance to score that touchdown by throwing a Hail Mary, and I don't know if his receivers were open. I don't know if the opportunity was there, but I know that he overthrew that football and it went into like the second row of the stands. And what's frustrating for me is that people are blaming the Oregon quarterback for losing the game, and it wasn't his fault. I mean, the Oregon defense could have been better and stopped Auburn from scoring at the end. There's so many factors. You can't blame him because of one play. Sometimes I could understand where it's kind of hard to judge your arm strength, and if you're throwing a Hail Mary, sometimes it's kind of hard to, especially if you're throwing it super far, he might have just overjudged it, and it happens. I think Oregon's still a good team, and they could go the rest of the season and only have that one loss to Auburn and make the college football playoff. This one loss isn't going to kill them. It's worse to have losses later on in the season. So the fact that this is the first game for Oregon could doesn't mean anything. It's a great win for Auburn. That's really good, especially since it's their non-conference. That'll look good. I know the college football committee, playoff committee, does look at non-conference schedule as well. So that might factor in. So if they're trying to decide between Auburn and another team, they look at non-conference. Well, Auburn played Oregon, who's a good team. So it's a pretty big game for them. And then I think I said the last game was Auburn-Oregon. I actually have one more. Notre Dame played Louisville, which normally would be a fairly decent game, but Louisville's unranked. Notre Dame is ranked pretty high. I expect to be a little closer. Notre Dame beat them pretty good. The game was looking close for a while, and then Notre Dame just kind of put it to them and ended up getting ahead in the lead. So that was a pretty nice game to watch. Moving on, we had the first NFL game last night. Overall, it was a low scoring game. I think I read something that it was the lowest scoring first game since like 1997 or 95, something like that, since the 1990s. I mean, the Packers only won by 7. They won 10-3, which sometimes, those defensive battles where teams aren't able to score is sometimes kind of nice, but I don't think it was 100% that the Packers offense was that, or I'm sorry, I don't think it was that the Packers defense was that great. I just think that, maybe the offense for Chicago was a little lackluster. Mitchell Trubisky, he didn't have an amazing completion percentage. He threw an interception. Obviously, he didn't have any touchdown passes. He didn't throw for very many yards. It's just sometimes when the offense doesn't have it, the defense doesn't have to be amazing. And so this may not have been a defensive battle, but I believe Chicago's defense was very good. They held Green Bay to 10 points. They held Aaron Rodgers to only one touchdown pass, which I believe that touchdown pass was to Jimmy Graham. Aaron Rodgers still got, a pretty good amount of yards, but it's definitely not as much as we've seen, and only one touchdown pass. I mean, that's pretty good for Chicago. I mean, they do have one of the better defenses in the league. Khalil Mack's awesome. He's just, like last season, he was a big highlight all season, and I expect him to continue the way he played all last season after the Raiders traded him. But 10-3, perfectly fine with me. I'm excited for this NFL season coming up. I hope that some of the games are a little more of like some of the college football, high scoring games. Sometimes it's kind of annoying that a defense gives up so many points in the NFL, but I enjoy those high scoring games personally. So I'm excited for this upcoming NFL season. We got games coming up on Sunday. Who knows? CBS Sports came out with a thing where it was a study for how all 32 teams have a chance for the Super Bowl title. I think that's a little excessive. I don't think there's several teams in the league, including my Giants, that I don't think are even going to sniff the playoffs. So, and that's fine. I love watching the NFL. I got my fantasy team going. Aaron Rodgers got me some pretty good points last night. The Chicago defense got me some points last night. Ready for tomorrow, ready for some more college football games, ready for some NFL games. I expect here in the next few weeks, baseball season is going to start winding down, getting towards the postseason. I know we're going to talk about the NL Central. Troy and I are both huge Cardinals fans, so that's a hot topic, obviously. My brother is a Cubs fan, so I'm going to try and get my brother on here in a few weeks so we can talk about that. The Cardinals and Cubs, 7 of their last 10 games are against each other. Cardinals and Cubs play a 4-game series, and then I'm not sure who the Cubs play, but the Cardinals play the Diamondbacks for a 3-game series, and then they finish the season against the Cubs for a 3-game series. That could be instrumental. I know right now the Cardinals have been playing very well. The Cubs haven't been playing bad. It's just the Cardinals they haven't lost very much. They've been playing really, really, really well. They have a few games. They're a few games ahead for the division. But, they're playing 7 games. A 7-game swing could make a big difference. So I hope we'll get to talk about that. And we'll also talk about, just the divisions winding down, wild card decisions coming towards for the playoffs. So that's what I expect in a few weeks. And then I know NBA training camp is going to be happening within the month. So we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about, odds and expectations for the upcoming NBA season, who we think might be the NBA champion now that the Golden State Warriors aren't as big of a powerhouse. The race for the championship's a little more open. So I expect that in the next few weeks. I appreciate you guys listening and subscribing. If you can, leave us a comment. Leave us a comment, see what you think. Subscribe to our page. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions for future episodes, you can always email me at saotpodcast@gmail.com. So, I would love suggestions on how to make the podcast better, suggestions on future episodes. It'd be great. So please go subscribe to our page. And, with that said, we'll talk to you guys next week.